Welcome to The Art of Growth. I'm Joel Hubbard.
And I'm Jim Zartman. Collateral damage of growth. Let's see if we can get canceled in the growth world.
Yeah.
With this one.
Oh, man.
Yeah, we're talking about the downside and the cost of it, but let's do it. Let's talk about the collateral damage of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, man. So, we've been talking about this thing of growth and how it impacts people around us, and that there is a cost, that when we make a decision to grow, it's really a decision to respond to something that's already begun in us. It's not like we're deciding I'm going to change today, I'm going to start doing these things. It's almost always in response to some other stimuli that no longer allows us to be the way we are, or has at least strongly invited us out, and we can respond. We can participate with it and say, okay, I'm going to start moving towards growth. And
you've said this before. No one grows by choice. Usually,
yeah, it's not like
pain.
You think it's a good idea,
right? It's like pain is forcing me to grow.
Yeah.
I have to do something different because it's not working the way it used to.
Right. So, hey, I got a great idea. I think I should just uproot everything, change everything in my life. Nobody chooses that because it's just ridiculously difficult to do so. There's a big cost to it personally. And there's a cost to it in terms of our relationships as well. And that's what we've been exploring, is what are the effects of growth in our circles. But what I like to talk about is minimizing that collateral damage. Like, there is so much that in my own past I can look back to and realize, wow, that cost a lot. Like way more perhaps than it should have. And in part it's because of the way when I begin to shift, the growth, as I've said before, it was perceived as, I'm changing, you're not.
Binary.
You're the reason for why I'm feeling the way I'm feeling. And so, therefore, you're the problem, right? And we can go all the way to villainizing, like, they're the enemy, But at least at those level, it's like, oh, you're the problem. You're the reason for the problems in my life. And I see this all the time. I mean, it's like it's happened in you can think of it everywhere. It's happened in the business world. I'm leaving my job because they're I've chosen this political party because the other party is. I've chosen this faith or this religion or this church because of, and it's always in reaction to something. That's the problem. I had a wise mentor once say, be careful of people that come to your group. At the time I was a pastor. Be careful for the people that come to your church smashing the previous church down.
Ooh.
Because they're going to do the same to you.
I've heard that people say that on dates. They're like,
yeah.
A huge red flag to me is if they're spending a lot of time like dissing their ex.
Yeah.
Like if I had a friend who literally I went out on this date. She's like, the whole time he just wanted to talk about how awful his ex was, and he was confused when I didn't want to talk negatively about mine. He thought there was something wrong with me that I didn't have. That I said, well, we're amicable. We've sort of worked this out. We separated, but no, it's like he needed some vitriol or something, and I'm like, that is a huge red flag. Yes.
Yeah. So that's the part that I think is helpful in our conversation. I do want to touch a few things. One would be that we can become very much the victim in every story that we tell. And I think when that happens, that should be a good eye opener for us. Like, oh, wow. Every story I tell, I'm somehow the victim of this.
Right.
And then there are people that don't want to appear weak. They'll tell the story. It implies that they're the victim, but that at the same time they're sort of like taking action and they're going to fight against the evil that's out there or something,
Yeah. The thing is, like, when I hear someone talk like this, and this is, I'm growing and I am not putting up with this toxicity in my life anymore. And I'm not going to just go along with the people who are just trying to take from me. There's a part of me that goes, yeah, you woke up to something. There was a pattern in your life. There was a pattern of behavior that was not serving you.
That's right.
And you are now awake to it. But your response to it, it's like fighting fire with fire. We know that there's a cycle of violence. That violence produces more violence. And that response of violence is going to have collateral damage to it.
Oh, yeah.
If you stop there and just say, these people were so toxic and now I'm free of them, And I'm like, so who is around you now? Like, who's your community now? Who is the new people that you are now walking out life with?
Yeah.
Because if your growth has come at the cost of your isolation, I would dare to say it wasn't worth it.
No, not at all. You can end up far worse, right? The thing that we destroy, oftentimes we are left with less rather than being free. It's like I'm free, yeah, but you're alone.
Mm-hmm.
You know, how's that feeling? Well, it feels terrible.
How's that desert island work?
Right, exactly.
Right? Because now you're only left with you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you're going to discover the problem hasn't totally disappeared.
No, man, it goes with you. We're the common denominator, right?
Yeah.
Of a lot of the issues that we're facing. And I should say it's, again, people might hear that it's like, well, does that mean it's me? No, it's not you. It's us.
Yeah.
We're trying to change us. And as best as you can, you do your part, but you recognize you're part of a whole. So they're having an impact on you. Because look, if you're with somebody else, they're not going to trigger the same things that this other person triggers. And we're a collective. And so our experiences around these people. So it's also, interrupting myself here, it's also a reason why even emotions, I've had this recent thought, it's so fresh that it's completely uncooked. But it's that emotions are not isolated, solo, experiential kind of things. I think they're more collective. If I cut something off in me, it has some effect in the relationships around me, and vice versa. So I'm like, if I see you as the cause of my pain and I cut you off, does that pain go away?
No.
But if I somehow am able to heal, at very least, do some healing work in me, and that includes the release or the forgiveness of the other. Not even like healed relationship necessarily, although that is profound. And if you can get there, man, that's awesome, because that itself heals that wound and the emotion around that. But if you can't even do that, if you can't do that with this other person, at very least you can do that for yourself as it relates to them. Like, I choose to release them. I choose to forgive them. I choose to see them in a different light. And in that process, you do heal, and then you're not carrying that with you. But I think if you take that as an isolated experience, like, I've been hurt by this other person and therefore I need to cut them off. I suspect that you're cutting off more than just the person. You're cutting off a part of yourself as well. And I think that that's the part that leaves us feeling more divided, more alone. So I think there's a lot of damage that we do oftentimes when we first emerge from being asleep, when we first wake up from being asleep. It's like that moment where you start to go, and the awakening, as Carl Jung talked about, is that like you were asleep in a wound, something happened, and it wakes you up. And then you go, oh man, there's some things I wasn't awake to that now I need to pay attention to, do something with. Yeah. And it's that's what we're saying. It's that response there that's critical. It's how we respond to that situation can create more damage, or can be something that helps to continue to move that from awake to a position of really being aware.
Yeah.
And so that's where I see most of us get stuck, and most of the work that we do with clients is in that gap, is in that space.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. Because I think the way I picture it is like you have a garden and it has this bush that you really want to be healthy in it. And you suddenly walk out one day and you realize you've like neglected it. Everything's overgrown. There's weeds all around it. You're like, oh my goodness, this is out of control. I have to do something about this now. And the reactivity to it is so rushed that you start pulling stuff out of the ground. You start cutting stuff off. And it's like, oh my goodness, now I've overpruned and I've almost killed something. Like, that's the reaction that I see happening when people are like, oh my goodness, they awaken. They're like, they see it. All of a sudden they see it. And they're so overwhelmed that the reaction to it is also destructive.
Yeah.
Because they're starting with wanting to make it right instead of starting with acceptance. When you start with acceptance and you say like, man, this is hard to wake up to. This is realizing, and you feel the shame of not doing it right. And you you feel that fear of if things stayed the same, where you would end up. And you get that justified anger of saying it shouldn't be like this. Got it. But now it's time to like wisely go, well, how do you prune a plant? How do you do it so that it actually can thrive, so that it can make it through this next winter? Like, how do you do that? Because long-term connections, long-term relationships, not one of them has zero pain in it.
Right. You're going to have cost to all growth. So that's the point I think we're trying to drive here, is not that there's no cost to it or that you can remove the cost to it. There's always going to be difficulty. The part that we can do work on and actually improve is, how do I stay present to this pain, to this awakening, to this sense of like, oh, I've given way more and I haven't received anything in return in this relationship. Or, I find myself, not really being supported or loved, or, I'm always the one doing for others, they're not doing for me. There's all sorts of narratives that we have that we wake up to that are interpretations of this pain of waking up to feeling alone, to feeling unloved, to feeling some kind of shame around who we are, who we've become. I think it's important for us to stay in that place just a little bit longer than to immediately going to, I've done all of this and this is what I've gotten in return. It's that resentment, that bitterness that can kick in. Yeah. That's a result of our expectations that we weren't even aware that we had these expectations, but we did. And they didn't get met, and then it results in that resentment and eventually bitterness. Let's catch it right at that point where you're waking up, you have this pain, and it does feel like you're unloved. It does feel like you're alone. It does feel this sense of shame. It can feel all sorts of things that you're having, and you do the work of naming that thing. Like, what is that I'm feeling right now? And then, okay, that's what I'm feeling. And boy, do I have my interpretations. Mm-hmm. What I say is don't try to force your mind not to come up with interpretations. Don't try to do that. Allow it to, but recognize that that's what it is.
Right.
And then separate it out from the feeling. Right. Like, oh, those are my interpretations. I do this daily. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I do this, but I do this all the time. It's like, this is the experience. This is my interpretation. And damn it, I believe that interpretation. I believe right now.
I totally do.
and I will hold on to, I will believe it right now, and I don't care, and I don't want anybody to convince me out of it. And I go through this, and then I know what I'm doing, and then it's, okay, now can you relax that interpretation?
Because when it comes to the cost of growth, when I have that kind of interpretation and I come up with the interpretation, I actually want you to pay the price of my growth. When it comes to there being a cost to that growth, I want someone else to pay it. And my interpretations will allow me to blame shift, to victimize, to take any kind of interpretation that doesn't make me go, okay, I really want this growth. I'm going to pay it.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is my bill.
Let me put some flesh on. Yeah. Let me put some flesh on this. Like, there are stories, I think I'll share mine so I don't expose anybody else's out there. But when I had this experience of, or recognizing that I had been expecting people to perform or to behave a certain way in my circles, and this was my burnout in 2015, 16, right around there. And recognizing how much I had, I didn't realize I had expectations of people, but like waking up and thinking all of this hard, intense push and work that I had done in the church I pastored at the time resulted in people doing whatever they wanted to do anyways, and blaming me for certain things, ending up leaving, all this stuff that I was waking up to, like all of my work and my effort had not resulted in what I didn't even know that I was expecting, which was this utopic sort of future. And as a 7, that's obviously what's always on my mind is if we do this, then there'll be that, right? There's this like utopia. And it doesn't result in that. And there's a disillusionment. Well, I didn't see it in all this. The way I'm languaging right now, I certainly did not have that feeling. What I woke up to was deep resentment and deep anger that was masking a sadness. And the interpretations were so strong, they were saying the reason is because people are this way, people are that way. It was all externalized.
Oh, yeah.
It's like the circumstance. And it even went to my wife. And so it was like the circumstances are the reasons why I'm angry and I'm frustrated. And I wanted to blame and see it that way. So did it poorly for sure. So, but that awakening was necessary. It's like that's actually the good thing is you're awakening. So we celebrate that part. Like, great, you've awakened to something. You're right. There's something broken. You're right. There's something really wrong about this whole thing. That puts a little flesh on how we want to blame the system. We want to blame other people. We want to point the finger. We want to, or in other cases where later on I turned it against myself and I villainized myself almost. It was like,
oh yeah,
I'm the cause of all of this, right? So I want to take the blame entirely. And it's a measure of control. It's definitely, I feel more, you realize later, that's all a matter of control. You're trying to control.
Self-flogging.
Yeah, because you're in charge. You can, right? Now, that way, I know next time if I don't do these things, then I will finally get to that utopic future. Right? So it's like, it's always still in service of that. And I think the loss of getting to the point where you can say this is more of a combination of factors, and I no longer need to be the victim or the villain. I can hold all of this and start to see, oh, right, this is my contribution, and this is how I can grow, right, and take real responsibility, which at that point equates to true freedom. That's where you move to more agency and more freedom, which is the trajectory I think we should all be aiming at as humans, is more of that and less of the other, and this was part of Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning book that really was profound for me. Was reading that during that time too. I had read it right around that period of time I was in burnout. It's like, oh, if there's anybody that can speak about circumstances being the reason why you feel the way you do, it would be survivors and victims of, the concentration camps. And he's one. And he's like, you can truly have freedom when you take that agency, internal agency. But it's that recognition of what parts do I have control of? And I think the victim mindset says, I have no control. I'm purely the victim. And then the villain mindset is, I have no control because I'm the villain. Like it's still not fully taking responsibility. In some sense, it takes a little bit more responsibility, I think, in that, like, I'm the cause and you see where you acted out in ways that were self-destructive. But I think that's the thing. It's this victimization is, I take no responsibility. It is the cause. The external factors are the reasons for why. And I'm careful to say, look, some of you, the events of your lives, and I've had plenty, were not my fault, and they weren't. There are things that are not your fault that have happened to you. So whatever caused the awakening, it's like something tragic, something painful, tremendously painful. This is not your fault. You didn't deserve that. But nonetheless, there's some responsibility you can take. And, let's narrow it down to specifically you're part of an environment, a circle, and in that circle you were playing a role. And there is something that you are taking away from that. There is some need that is getting met. As dysfunctional as it might be, people who leave what they call codependent relationships, or a relationship in which someone was very dependent on them, and they say, I'm tired of always being the one that's rescuing everybody, fixing everything, and then they end that. They're like, I'm done, not happening anymore. It's like, okay, you're right. You even, in some cases, they even had a legitimately narcissistic person in their circle.
Sure.
But then the question has to become, and we have to ask ourselves this question, why did I stay in it as long? What was I getting out of it? Why didn't I even see it? Why didn't I see it at the beginning? Like, other people saw it. Other people said right away, like, you shouldn't be in this relationship. This person's a taker, and they warned me, but I didn't listen. So I think it's really, really good. And I've had plenty of clients who have said that's the work they've begun doing. And they could start to see, like, oh, right, now I see this. Including, stories of where by every measure, they're the victim.
Yeah.
Like, I can't repeat some of these stories, but they are definitely the victim.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's like, but how long did you stay in that relationship? It's like, well, for a very long time. Did you see some things? Well, now in retrospect, I can see those things.
Right.
And I can see I was trying to blind myself. I wanted to be blind to it because I was getting something out of it. That's the points of where we start to move out of that I'm purely the victim, Yeah. And I am a victim, yes. But what part did I play in this where I was getting something out of it and therefore kept myself in that prison rather than taking that agency and freedom that I do possess and taking that back?
Because we think what we want is for things to be better. We want things to be good. This is what we articulate when we talk about it. But subconsciously, what we're actually looking for is confirmation of how we think the world really works. Yeah. The type is looking for confirmation. When we've been hurt, we're looking for confirmation in our other relationships that we're going to be treated the same way because that's the way the world works. We're trying to confirm the reality as we know it. And so it is really hard to break out of that. And this is why Hollywood script writers, novels writers know that the best villain you can paint is not the one that's pure evil. They're the one that's most relatable, where you say, I can totally see how they got there.
Yeah.
It makes sense that they were a victim. And so it makes sense that they have become this kind of person, which is, I think, one of the reasons that even though I had a hard time with it, I was so inspired by Nelson Mandela as a young 19-year-old listening to his book, working in a janitor at a hotel, because I remember him talking about getting out of prison after 27 years of being held unjustly, of like it being illegal to print his words in newspapers, like all of these issues, but that he held to, no, unity is more important. And I remember reading where he said he had come out of prison and people were asking him, are you angry with the people who held you in prison all this time? And he said, no, if I was, I'd still be in prison. Because he understood it wasn't the location. It wasn't the thing happening to it. Like what he did with it. This is the Buddhist thing too, right? That pain is inevitable, like suffering is optional.
Right.
That is the work of growth. So our response to it is, it says just as much as the fact that we're trying to get out of a situation that we know, we're awake. We see it. We go, this is not the reaction that we want to have.
Yeah. Yeah. Last thing I want to say about this is people who hate the whole victimization, who right now are probably going, yeah, man. Yeah, absolutely. I'm so with you on this whole thing. I'm tired of people that play victim. I want to say that there are plenty of people who do not want to ever be a victim, so much so that they deny that anything has impacted them.
Yes. Thank you. Good.
And I'm one of them for a long time. God, I can't tell you how long I was like, I will never be affected. I will not allow myself to be affected. I hate that whole thing of like, so, and then of course, plenty of other types that do that as well, that are just like resistant to being impacted. I think many of us do, epitomized certainly by the type 8, probably more so than most others. That and the type 5, I think, also very much like resisting being impacted or affected. And wow, do we deny the fact that we've been victimized by anything? Mm-hmm. And then as a result, they will say that they're not the victim, and they will act like they're not the victim. And everything they do communicates that very clearly to everybody. I'm not the victim. I've not been affected by this. You got to suck it up. You got to move on. You got to do something about it. But the way that still shows up is in so many other ways. The ways that they interact with people can be very gruff, they create an atmosphere of where it is, they're difficult to be with. And all of that stuff that has ever happened to them is coming through the way they interact with people. So there's no gentleness, there's no understanding, no compassion. And it is a way of surviving, but the victim is still there. The victimization is still there. It's just in denial of that. And so it's functioning very much in the way that they interact. So the atmosphere they create around them and all that, it's like, well, the rest of us are bearing the results of all the wounds that you've ever experienced, but you're not owning that. And I think that that's something that other people have experienced. And they say, sure, you're in denial of it. I had one type 8 say to me with tears, my wife has actually started to call me weak. And it was because I'm always trying to control everything. And she has finally called me out and said, you are not in touch with the reason for all of that and what's happening underneath. And it was this whole thing of like, because of how many times he had been disappointed, or people had done something, proven themselves to be untrustworthy, people had betrayed him, that all of this stuff was like, now I'm taking even more control. Now I'm you know, and so it's like, you're not dealing with the victim that's inside you.
Yeah, that's one of the big narratives right now, right? So we have both of these narratives going on. You have the one side that's like, well, I'm not putting up with this toxic thing anymore, and I'm healing, and I'm pushing away from this, and these people are bad, and like calling out the victimizers, the villains. And there's other people like, no, it's all about, you just got to push through and be tough and do this. And like, it's just about, it doesn't matter what happened to you. There's those gym shirts. Have you seen those? Like, nobody cares, work harder.
Yeah,
like
I
that
see them
kind
in the
of
gym.
thing. Pain is gain. And I'm like, sometimes pain is injury.
Yeah.
Like, like that. And so you do have that binary. And I'm just like, you can't. One is, I guess they're both kind of different versions of denial, but
right,
yeah, it's not that neither of those are really the solution.
Well, neither one are taking responsibility. Like, something has happened.
Yeah,
right. You can deny it, or you can play, or you can expose it endlessly. But either way, taking responsibility. I mean, what are you going to do with it? What are you going to do with the wound? What are you going to do with the fact that you've woken up now to the fact that you're not entirely in a safe, lovely, wonderful world? That's what the wake up does. The wake up is this like, oh my gosh, I didn't know, right? And that snaps you out of your naivete and your innocence. Yeah. And that happens early on in life, but then it repeats itself. So the question is, what do we do with that? And I think that's what we're suggesting is stay present to the pain, validate, and work through the 3 centers, man. This is the thing we always come back to. The 3 centers will always guide you well. So you validate the pain. You don't justify it. You don't explain it. You don't try to rationalize it. You don't try to interpret it. It's just, that one really hurt. Now I say you don't do all these things. What I mean by that is you don't do them blindly. Do them, but do them with your eyes open, as I was saying earlier. Oh, hold on. Oh, yeah. Have your interpretation. These people all suck. Yeah, that's fine. Have that interpretation, but recognize that's what you're doing. And then relax that so that you can start to stay open to the possibilities of there's other interpretations beyond those. What's the head center? You know? And then how do I move forward? Of course, it's the body center. And I think if we take that approach of that's what's going on for me right now, that's how I'm feeling, this is my experience, and then stay open to what is the path trying to teach me? What is the path teaching me right now? What am I learning? And stay open to that the lessons will come and the wisdom will come, and not on your terms all the time, but they will come. And that's the awakening of, oh, and that's what true awareness is oh, right. There's a part of me that I was looking for this, and that's what that gave me. And you know what? Maybe I don't need that right now. Maybe I can grow through that. Maybe I can get that need met in a different way. There's all sorts of awakening and awarenesses that come when we stay present and pause long enough rather than live in that reactivity that tends to guide most of us.